Hello, and you're very welcome to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. My name is Peter Cinnamon, and the name of the current Linfield manager is David Healy. That's not a sentence I was 100% sure I'd be saying come the time of me doing this intro, but it is in fact true. And by all accounts, he's set to be there in the hot seat for another season or two yet. This is of course after he committed himself to the club over the weekend, despite the heavily publicised approach by Scottish Championship side Raith Rovers. We're going to react to this news, of course, as well as pull back the curtain on what impact this could have long term on the trajectory of this current footballing marriage between the Blues and Healy. We're also going to look ahead to what is a massive week for Larne and their pursuit of European League stage opportunities, and what will it mean for the rest of the Irish League if they can do it. We're going to talk about all that on what should be another fun-filled edition of your latest weekly kicking match. That's me back on home soil after a week gallivanting away. I hope you had a good long weekend, however you spent it. I spent mine having a hook at random West End shows and wrestling events, and you know what, you could combine all the drama that I saw on stage and in ring and all the rest, and it would be nothing. It wouldn't be a scratch on what 7 days can offer in Irish League news and on-pitch drama, which means I've got a pretty tasty little pod for you to enjoy this week, and it is in the company of sports writer Mark McIntosh. Hello, Mark.
How are you, Peter?
I'm doing very, very well. Big weekend in the big smoke. Not that anybody actually listens to this notice, unless they were having a hook on Twitter and all the rest, but it's amazing when you're slightly out of the bubble for a couple of days, how so much seems to happen, and then you coming back going, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And that's kind of how I felt seeing all the news, all the chat, all the games. So a different experience, but you know, the glorious thing that is modern technology, I was able to follow it all.
You always feel like you're a million miles away, though, don't you? If you miss one thing, there's always stuff happening. There's always some crazy story.
Totally. I was walking around some random gallery with my face stuck to my phone, getting told off by my wife because I'm like, hold on a second here, like something's going down. I need to see what the crack is, and I'm like trying to explain to her why the comments that Healy makes after this game is going to be a big deal, and she's like, well, look at this big piece of art from 1972, and I'm like, that can wait. There's big news potentially on the horizon, and you know, we'll get to the games into a second, but it has emerged, and then it fell away. Big news in regards to Healy and Linfield. Before the games on Saturday, there was a chance it was going to be his last game at Windsor Park against Loughgall, and it has now transpired that he's sticking around, baby. Healy and Linfield are like the Gallagher brothers. They're in it together now.
Yeah, indeed. Let's hope he doesn't look back with anger and all that nonsense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, listen, I think David Healy was a lot closer to leaving Linfield than some people are actually saying at this moment in time. You know, a lot of people are saying that he maybe used this to get a better deal at Linfield, and look, that possibly could have happened. I don't think so personally. I think he was tempted by it. You know, David Healy has maybe been linked with jobs in the past, you know, most recently Preston, but I think this was the first realistic job. You know, I know there was talk maybe of Grimsby a year ago or whatever, but I think this was the first realistic one that it really could have happened. Now, it's great for Linfield, of course. David Healy's there, you know, he's a very successful manager. But I actually think Linfield have a lot of questions to answer on this one. You know, certainly my information was always that, you know, David Healy was out of contract at the end of the season, and they would probably give it till Christmas to see how Linfield were doing in the league and talk about a contract extension then. Now, it's very clear that the chairman, Roy McGivern, who's a huge ally of David's and has been a huge help to David throughout his time at Linfield, he was certainly very keen to keep David. Whether or not that was a unanimous thing with the board, I mean, I think that's maybe something that they won't answer, but they maybe could answer at some stage. You know, just looking through social media, which of course isn't the best guide in the world, but, you know, some people are happy, some people are questioning it, and other people are just maybe concerned about the timing of Linfield giving David a new deal. But look, let's be honest, he's hugely successful. He's won 5 league titles. He's been there nearly 9 years. He's won various other trophies. Linfield are lucky to have David Healy, and they should be celebrating right now that David Healy will be their manager.
I totally agree. I think he has a brilliant track record. I think you can also see when, even as an outsider watching the games, what he does and how he sets out his team. He can be very astute. He has picked out some great talent to build his team around, and I think in recent times he is coming up against this huge mammoth that is the Larne team, and he's had to try, even though Linfield are usually the big bad boys and with all the money and all the rest, they are having to try and work and box clever ever so slightly. And when I heard the news over the weekend, it brought me back to an interview he did after winning that most recent title 2 years ago. This frostiness between him and the fans, and he's went on over the past 2 years. He hasn't won the league, but from a points total, it has been pretty successful. He's had to say goodbye to a couple of players. He hasn't always got it right, but I think you can tell why clubs outside of the Irish League are looking at somebody like him. And, you know, when you talk about potentially it not being a unanimous love or affection for him at the higher echelons of the club, yes, he signed a new contract, but is this a signal that ultimately this might not be a long-term marriage?
Yeah, look, I don't think David Healy will be there, necessarily for as long as David Jeffrey was there, or Stephen Baxter, reign of Crusaders. I don't see that. Um, I think this is the first proper indication that there is life after Linfield. And look, David has never hidden the fact that he's ambitious. He wants to manage at the highest level he possibly can. He thinks he's got unfinished business with Linfield, but in my opinion, Linfield are years behind Larne. Larne have got so many things right off the pitch where I think Linfield struggle. Again, you hear lots of rumours about, are Linfield considering going back to a part-time model if they don't win the league this year. Again, that's possible. I don't think that would ever be in the plan for Larne. I look off the pitch what they're doing in terms of training facilities, hospitality facilities. They clearly have a plan on and off the pitch. Linfield don't seem to have that across the club. And on the pitch, I think a lot of Irish League fans will tell you that this is maybe one of the more average Linfield sides compared to their usual standards. Now, you can argue all day long whether that's fair or unfair. But if that is a bang average Linfield side, they almost won the league last year with everything that Larne have going for them. That's down to obviously the players, but also the manager and his management team. And that's what Linfield have to be very careful what they wish for sometimes. Um, it's a fascinating club, Linfield. People think maybe Linfield have always been loaded down the years and they should win the league every year. Maybe that comes with a completely different type of pressure, and with David Healy, you wouldn't really know that pressure exists. But like I remember the interview you were referring to there as well. The last time Linfield won the league, I was in the room when he gave the interview. I thought at that stage it was maybe the best time for him to go. Um, a lot of people thought he would go. I think maybe even some players thought they were going to struggle to hold on to him. But he's come back fighting, and yes, he hasn't won the league in the last 2 seasons, but no one will be more determined than David Healy to win this league this season.
One aspect of that news story which stood out to me was that the team looking at him was Raith Rovers, a team in the Scottish Championship. And I thought, I appreciate to get into that ladder of Scottish and English league football, you perhaps aren't going to jump up at a very high rung on the ladder. But at best, that felt like a sideways move to me. Perhaps maybe the opportunity there, it means that it's a far bigger job than Linfield, but he was not walking into a similarly sized job that we've seen maybe people from League of Ireland. I'm thinking of Pat Fenlon moving over into the Scottish leagues. Like Raith Rovers, I don't know if it was going to be a massive, massive step up for him, or perhaps it was.
Look, I know what you mean, but a lot of these people who maybe went to perceived bigger clubs haven't really spent too long there when they've got the move to these so-called bigger clubs. It's easy to say Linfield are a bigger club than Raith. Again, I don't know enough about Raith to tell you whether that's the truth or not. But they were in a playoff to get into the Scottish Premiership at the end of last season. They've got huge ambition. And look, we all love the Irish League. I would rather watch the Irish League than any league in the world. But let's be totally honest about this. If David Healy had gone to Raith and done half the job that he's done at Linfield, it will have been noticed by 10 times as many people. And that's the reality of it. And that's why I think, for ambition's sake, if he was to go to a Raith Rovers and get them promoted and face the big sides in Scotland every week, I think David Healy's stock would have risen. And that's why he has to look at it. I think it's too simplistic just to say, oh, Linfield are bigger than Raith. And look, ultimately, he's decided against it. The very fact that they sacked their manager one game into the season, I'm sure was a bit of a red flag to him as well. You know, and there's been a lot of talk around that, and it seems to be that it very much was a football decision. Now, how you can make that decision after a summer when the transfer window had been open and you lose one game, it baffles me. So, maybe David's looked at that as well and thought, it's maybe not as stable as a club as he would like.
And he should have the ability to make that move eventually, outside of what he's achieved at Irish League level. From these clubs' point of view, he is an ex-international player, played all the way up into Premiership football. He is a player who has a bit of pedigree that these clubs would look at and go, he knows what this leagues and this type of football should be about. The only thing on his copybook is that if you were a fan of a League Two club and you're looking at this player, this manager, and you're thinking, well, he hasn't won the league for the past 2 years. Yes, he was good a couple of years ago. Is there a ticking clock for David now where if he doesn't win the league, the window for moving across to England or Scotland could start to close ever so slightly?
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Like I said earlier on, there's been speculation about him taking jobs or other clubs being interested in him, but there's never been any sort of firm interest in terms of offers until now. So yeah, he could miss the boat, and he will be more aware of that than anyone else. And history tells us that it's extremely difficult for any Irish League manager to get that move. We've seen lots of players move to English and Scottish clubs in recent times, which is brilliant. But the likes of David Jeffrey and Stephen Baxter, they've done some incredible jobs within the Irish League and have never had that opportunity. So there is a chance that David Healy maybe has missed his chance. That said, if he goes and wins the league this season, then maybe his stock will be as high as ever and he will look at it. But one thing I always remember, when he signed, not long after he signed his last contract at Linfield, he did say that he could never see a time when he would walk out of Linfield during a contract. He would stay to the end of that contract unless the offer was appealing to Linfield as much as it was to him. So I would expect him to be there for the next 2 years, as is the new deal. But look, if Larne run away with a title, all these questions will be there again in a year's time, and it might not be so easy for David to make his own decision at that stage.
Do you think this could reignite a bit more of a love affair with him and people throughout the club, from the terraces to the boardroom, knowing what they could have lost and looking at the potential people who could have been sitting in this seat? It's been a great start to the league, and they have this nice little bit of extra cushion between them and Larne, who will be chasing them like a tiger. The reality of him not being there, did that maybe awaken some eyes and make them think, oh, actually, you know what? We do have a good thing going here, despite the fact that we haven't achieved to the level that we would want to.
Yeah, look, I think there'll be quite a few people. You don't know what you've got till it's gone and all that. I think a lot of people were nervous over the weekend. A lot of people have probably resigned themselves to the fact that he was going to leave. But look, this is Linfield. And, the vast support that Linfield have, there's a lot of cynics in there. And, as we discussed earlier, I'm sure there's a lot of people are looking at it and thinking David Healy has played Linfield here. And like I said, only he knows the real truth of that. I don't think that's the case. But I know a lot of Linfield fans will also think that. And being Linfield, and David knows this better than anybody, you lose a couple of games and you're the worst manager on the planet. You know nothing about it, and then 2 weeks later, you put a couple of wins together and they love you again. That's just part of the soap opera that is Linfield, and probably most clubs, if we're being honest. Um, but yeah, I would hope that more people will realise now that, Linfield will be stronger with David Healy.
And no doubt, a part of this extension has been a little bit more juice in the drink for him. And would even the potential idea of investment in players be on the table, or is that more of a thing that fans are frustrated about, seeing a lot of great young players moving on for significant fees and not seeing a whole lot of that going back out the door to bring in top quality replacements to try and knock Larne off their perch?
Well, look, I would be amazed if David Healy, during these discussions with Linfield, didn't have a conversation about the money that Linfield are spending on players. It's very clear they've been left behind. Larne, certainly. Other clubs have spent money in a way that Linfield haven't in recent years. Now, of course, they did fork out quite a lot of money for Matthew Fitzpatrick a year ago. There's no doubt about that. But it's not the done thing at Linfield and hasn't been for a long time. And I think for David to compete properly, especially if Larne were to go and qualify for the league stages now as well, I think for David to compete properly, Linfield have to splash the cash one way or another. Whether that's with some of the reserves they have, which they clearly do, but they're very prudent in how they spend it, or whether they bring in an outside investor. And look, it's been discussed. I don't think that would be as plain sailing as maybe as it seems. My understanding is that certainly one person has already sort of quietly been spoken to see if it would interest them. And I think that one's just to watch this space. I think Linfield are going to have to think outside the box, because history again tells us they're not going to spend the money that's maybe going to be needed within the Irish League to stay top dogs, because Linfield, if there's one thing about that club, they certainly think they're the top dogs no matter who wins the league. But they're going to have to back that up. And the only way you do that, unfortunately, in football these days, is to spend a few quid.
We don't have the books in front of us, but I know a lot of football fan economists would look at Linfield and say, you've sold three, in particular, recently great players for significant Irish League fees. You are a team that does well in the league over the past few years, do get into Europe. You also are raking in a fair whack in attendance money. You look at the amount of fans that consistently come to Linfield games, and they are a level of a club that should be professional. So how are they looking at this? And there is, of course, investment into Larne. Are they not right to go, should we not be a bit more forthright and invest and try and gamble, rather than feeling like a bit more of a club that feels like they're a bit more misery about it all?
Yeah, look, again, it's maybe that sort of traditional attitude of Linfield of, the biggest club in Ireland. And, down the years, every young player wanted to sign for Linfield because it was Linfield. Those days have gone. Now, I may stand to be corrected, but in my opinion, there's still too many people around Linfield that have that attitude and don't realise, or don't want to realise, that not every player wants to sign for Linfield just because they're Linfield. They'll rightly go elsewhere for money. They'll go elsewhere maybe because there's better chance of winning silverware. Although that's always a difficult argument when Linfield in the mix for you. But yeah, look, Linfield have been prudent with their money. There's no doubt about that. I remember someone saying to me several years ago that Linfield have money in the bank, but it's there for a rainy day. Well, look, those dark clouds started in Larne. It's now pouring down. It's absolutely chucking it down. Linfield have to spend money, whether that's money that they already have in the coffers, or whether that's going to be bringing in outside investment. I think their hand will be forced, and they're going to have to do something like that. But given the setup at Linfield, it's a members' club. Any decision on that would have to be taken by the members. And like I said earlier, I don't think that's going to be quite as straightforward as some people think.
One thing to mention when we talk about it being such a rarity of Irish League managers moving across, Owen Kearney is definitely the outlier in that when he moved to St Mirren, and for a long time he was touted as an eventual successor at Linfield. Perhaps it seems quite clear that his priorities has changed now in his role at Coleraine. With Healy poised to move over the weekend, the mill started churning in the sense of, well, who could be the next Linfield manager? It's not something that needs to be worried about over the next 12 months, let's just say. But I was hearing more that it was not going to be, if Healy was to move on, it was not going to be some sort of big name from elsewhere. There is somewhat of a clear succession plan. Is that something that's been mooted for a while, or is this more talk of, well, how are we going to try and keep some sort of continuity of this current Linfield setup?
Well, look, for years, certainly in my lifetime, Linfield have tended to look to a point from within, or someone from within the Linfield family, if you want to use that phrase. Um, and there's been a lot of talk, certainly since Jamie Mulgrew signed, certainly his last couple of extensions, that maybe that is the succession plan, that someday Jamie Mulgrew will be the guy that takes over. Um, would it have been too early for Jamie Mulgrew to take over right now? I would say probably yes, but that's also due with the fact that I don't think Jamie's done with his story on the pitch just yet either. Even last season he was instrumental into what Linfield were doing. So look, I think certainly many people behind the scenes at Linfield would love Jamie to be the heir apparent. And I think that will probably happen at some stage. But if David had have left this week, I personally probably would have been looking at people like Tommy Wright. He's certainly got a lot of experience in full-time football. He's managed at various levels of football. I'm sure Tommy won't mind me saying he's a blue man. He's a former player of the club. He knows it inside out, and I'm sure that he would have been someone very high on the list. And you mentioned Owen Kearney, and look, I can see why a lot of people would want him, given his track record. And again, he's a very clear, firm fans' favourite at Linfield from his playing days there. But Oren wasn't prepared to take the Coleraine manager's job on a full-time basis because of his work. Now, he now has his work and he has his job as director of football at Coleraine, which is a big enough job. Is he going to give up both of those things to take the Linfield job? I just don't see it. So again, I think it would have been people like Tommy Wright. Yes, Oren would have been talked about. I'm sure Stephen Baxter would have been talked about as a former player.
But Baxter's one where I felt when he said he was moving on earlier this year, I thought, I do believe that you are moving on and potentially retiring, unless the Blues job comes up, I must say.
I don't even think it would take just the Linfield job. I think that fire still burned within Stephen Baxter. I don't think he's done by a long shot just yet. You never know what happens at Glentoran. Again, that's another club that every manager thinks they can turn things around. And look, good luck to Decky Devine, as he's the latest one to try and do it. But I'm sure within Stephen Baxter, he's thinking to himself, David Jeffrey and Rory Coyle have both shown they can win trophies at different clubs. He's done everything with Crusaders and more, but he will want to go and win trophies at another club as well. He wants to show everybody that he's not just that one-trick pony. So there's definitely life in Stephen Baxter yet, and of course the Linfield job would have appealed to him. Whether he ever would have said that publicly would have been another thing, but of course it would have appealed to him. And look, it would have appealed to someone like Ian Barraclough as well. He's been interested in the Glentoran job in the past. Yes, he's never managed in the Irish League, but he knows the league quite well from his time with the 21s and with a senior job, plus when he was manager down south. So Ian Barraclough, again, people will have turned their noses up at that immediately. I think that's maybe doing him a bit of a disservice. But I think just with someone like Barra, that might show you that people outside Northern Ireland would be interested in the Linfield job immediately if it was to come up right now. Whether Linfield would do that or not, like I said, they normally try to look within the Linfield family. And I think ideally that's what they want to do when David Healy's time does eventually come to an end. But if it was sooner rather than later, I think they may go for someone like Tommy.
Well, as soon as the news that David Healy had recommitted himself to Linfield, what then emerged was chat that perhaps Joel Cooper, based on his previous record and the way he started the season, he might be drawing some interest as well outside of the Irish League. There's not a huge amount of clubs being directly linked to him, but you must say, based on what he's achieved and how he started the season, you can see exactly why somebody would want to take a punt on a player like that.
Oh, completely. Look, there's never been any doubt in Joel's ability. We've seen that, maybe in flashes at Ballyclare, but when he went to Glenavon, he lit the place up, and that's how he got his move to Linfield. And then he went on again after that and got his move to Oxford. Now, I think there are several reasons why that maybe just didn't work out for him, but he wouldn't be the first player that gets a move and it doesn't work out, but he comes back, works hard, and gets a move again. And it's only natural the start of the season he's had. He appears to be injury free, thankfully. He's scoring goals, he's creating goals. I think someone said that he's got 11 goal involvements already, which is crazy. So there's no surprise that maybe clubs are having a look. Now, I also think that maybe there's agents doing a bit of work as well. It's silly season, a few days to go in the window. That's how this game works. But if I was Joel Cooper, I would be keeping my head down and doing what I'm doing at Linfield, because if he has another great season, those chances will still come for him. There will be people interested, and as we've seen in recent years, these clubs are now looking at the Irish League and their talent.
My follow-up question to that is it all down to the chewing gum? Because every time I see that, that slightly infuriates me. Why are you playing football and chewing gum? What's going on there?
There's a few players like that, yeah, but it's more pronounced in Joel. I think, interviews, playing the game constantly, it's incredible. It's like Matty Clark. Matty Clark didn't need chewing gum when he was at Linfield, but every time he kicked the ball, he used to sort of puff out his cheeks. And once you see it once, you can't unsee it. And I'm even looking through pictures now at Livingston to see it. I'm a glutton for punishment, but yeah, Joel's constantly he should probably get a sponsorship deal with some chewing gum company. I think that's maybe the future for him.
That's the future there, the face of insert chewing gum company here in Northern Ireland. So that's Linfield. We talked about maybe the idea that people are frustrated, maybe Linfield aren't investing in players. That's not something that Larne is scared to do. They are on the precipice of something incredible if they're able to do it this week. But even before that, getting through to this playoff round has boosted their coffers, and they are firing it out to other people. McIntosh has joined. Sam Todd has also followed him along from Derry. And one of the big transfers of the year, it finally happened. Benji McGee is now a Larne player. Interesting move, significant investment, no doubt. But if Larne get this right, my goodness, have they nailed it with this player?
Well, yeah, and look, just looking at their transfer business, and they have to sign players in case they do get into the league stages in Europe. They're going to need a much bigger squad. We all know they're already several games behind, and in the Irish League as well. So they need a big squad. But I mean, at the minute, it looks like they've got a bigger squad than Chelsea in Irish League terms. But I think obviously they're looking at maybe at shifting a few people on. They've kind of gradually done that this summer as well. And Benji McGee is, of course, the standout name. He's the player that Linfield were certainly interested in. Cliftonville had been interested in him. Glentoran has certainly been interested. For one reason or another, it didn't look like it was going to happen this summer for him. And look, again, some people are excited by Benji because he scored a lot of goals last season, a lot of sort of eye-catching goals as well at that. Whilst other people might say, oh, but the minute he's a one-season wonder, or he didn't end the season as well as he started it, and all of that. I think that's unfair. I think he's an exciting talent. He's exactly the type of player that you can see, Tiernan and Seamus Lynch, wanting to get on the training pitch. They'll certainly feel that they can develop him. And look, we don't know what the transfer fee was. We can all assume that it was certainly sizable. But look, all the eyebrows were raised too when they signed Lee Bonus and thought, Portadown have done a number on them there, 100 grand. I can't believe they've signed Lee Bonus for 100 grand. Worked out all right. They've more than doubled their money on him, to my knowledge. And, he turned out to be a fantastic player. And there's no reason why Benji McGee can't do that. But I think at the same time, we need to sort of relax a little bit. He's still a young lad in terms of Irish League football. That was his first proper full season. Let's see what he does. He's got all the support around him that he'll need at Larne. He's got a manager that believes in him. He's got players who'll be great to play with and bring the best out in him. And I wish him nothing but luck.
You talk there about outs. There's still talk that Fisher could follow McGee along in there, and despite losing Bonus, that does make that a very busy forward area and in the room, in that changing room. And it stood out to me that away in Faro, he's just signed, that they're bringing on Benji McGee rather than Paul O'Neill. I know there's been talk of maybe him finding another club. Pretty much through his entire time at Larne, he spent a bit of time first choice with Lee Bonus before Andy Ryan came in, and then for the past 18 months he's been third choice. Has he been moved down the pecking order? McKendry's still amongst the collection there as well. If Fisher comes in, does that not signify that perhaps O'Neill's going to move on?
Well, look, I think the writing's been on the wall for quite a long time for Paul O'Neill at Larne. I know Larne certainly would still have an interest in Fisher, and people maybe think instantly that Benji McGee was Lee Bonus's replacement. I don't think Larne ever saw it like that. He was just another player that they wanted to have because he will add to their squad. I think Fisher would be more the Lee Bonus replacement as such, if you wanted to look at it that way. But look, Paul O'Neill has had several chances to leave Larne in the past year. Glentoran and Cliftonville have certainly tried on more than one occasion to bring him back to the clubs that he used to play for. But he's made it clear from basically every time there's been an approach that he wants to stay and fight first place. Now, there comes a time when you maybe have to realise that it's not going to happen for you. And as you rightly say, Benji McGee was only in the door and he came on before Paul O'Neill last week. Matty Lusty, young lad, spent last season at Dungannon Swifts. He started the game ahead of Paul O'Neill. Now, to me, that would be the alarm bell straight away. Yes, Matty Lusty's a very promising young player. That's great to see his development. But Paul O'Neill isn't going to get into that side unless there are injuries. And if they go and sign the likes of a David Fisher, I think Paul O'Neill would be better looking elsewhere for the sake of his own career.
And we're talking about David Healy attracting interest from English and Scottish league teams. Larne are making waves in Irish League football, obviously, but that is being recognised beyond these shores. Why isn't maybe Tiernan Lynch being looked at in the same way, especially now if they are able to get things across the line this week and get into Europe? Is it just a case of doesn't have the same name value that Healy does and has still got a tiny bit to prove, with the idea that he has been able to lead the ship and it is a ship with a rather well-stocked arsenal?
I don't think he's got much to prove in terms of what he's doing in the Irish League. The fact that he got Larne promoted, they consolidated, they've challenged for the title, and now they've won back-to-back titles. You can't really do much more than that. I think his biggest problem in terms of getting a move across the water would be, you're right, he doesn't have the profile of a David Healy. He didn't play in the Premier League, he didn't play in Scotland, didn't score lots of goals for his country. But also, Larne don't have the name of Linfield. It's sometimes easier to look at who's the Linfield manager. People who don't know anything about the league will probably just assume Linfield are winning everything and, who's their manager. But make no mistake about it, Tiernan Lynch is an ambitious man too. And he loves the job he has at Larne. He loves everything about what is going on at that club. But I'm sure he would fancy a crack elsewhere to show everybody what he can do. I think the biggest thing for Tiernan as well, maybe he doesn't have people in the background working for him in terms of getting his name out there, as much as other people would do. But if Scottish clubs are looking at David Healy, make no mistake about it, they will be looking at Tiernan Lynch. And Whether Tiernan decides that would be something he wants to do in time if he got an opportunity, I would be astonished if it didn't appeal to him.
Larne's European run has been much talked about on this podcast over the past couple of weeks, and it all comes down to Thursday night, Inver Park. They're 2-1 down after their game in Faro, and now they bring the Gibraltar champions, Lincoln Red Imps, to their home ground with history on the horizon for them. They're not out of it. They still have plenty to do. It's finally poised. What does your gut tell you going into it? Because I'm very, very nervous for them, it must be said.
Yeah, I would be the same. Look, before a ball was kicked in the first leg, I thought this isn't going to be as easy as a lot of people think, but they should have enough to do it over two legs. And having watched the first leg, I think Larne are the better side. I think Larne will create chances. My only fear is Larne's defending was shambolic in the first leg, and that's not something you normally associate with them. Now, is it early season teething problems? Maybe. Um, did the heat maybe play a factor in Faro? I don't know, possibly. But look, I think the smaller pitch, the pitch used to, I think that'll help them at Inver. Tight ground, you know, boisterous crowd. I think all of those things will go in their favour. And if Larne play to the potential they have, I think that they will just about have enough to overturn the deficit. And look, I know Stephen Bacon wrote a piece recently talking about the fact that a lot of the league will not be happy if Larne get to the league stages in Europe. I understand that because, yes, one is jealousy, but also the fact of money that it leads to, and it'll be out of this world for Larne. But as an Irish League fan, I am busting for Larne to do this. I was busting for Linfield to do it, a couple of years ago when they fell short. And I just hope it's not the same hard luck story for Larne because, even when Linfield just missed out against RFS, we all thought, all right, okay, that we've got very close now. Maybe next year. It's never as simple as that. And I don't think Larne will ever have a better chance. With all due respect to Lincoln Red Imps, um, who did well in the first leg, but with all due respect, I just think Larne will never ever have a greater opportunity to do this.
That's a part of it. It's the feeling of here is your chance, shoot your shot. And we've all played various types of sport where sometimes the pressure of the easy shot, the easy knock in, can be overwhelming. And there's no point saying that Lincoln Red Imps, they're not minnows in any way in regards to the level of football that they're playing and how they compare to Larne. But there is pressure on Larne. There isn't this Northern Ireland versus England superheroes, can you do it, Mighty Mouse style thing. Like that, there is an expectation on them, and it just feels typical from being a general Irish League fan that we just can't get over the line. And what is potentially on the other side of these doors is it's just even hard to comprehend how it might change the league, and if other teams getting in over the next few years could make that window even smaller. One of the things that's floating about that talk about Larne getting this multi-millions of pounds if they get through to the league phase, but the reason why maybe some other clubs would want it is that money will trickle down if they get through.
Yes, solidarity payments are huge, and for some clubs in Irish League football. Remember these solidarity payments go to the clubs who finish, bottom of the table. And I think the way it's maybe structured now, maybe some people will correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think there was a change made about 18 months ago, and the solidarity payments were structured in a way that, the teams finishing higher up the table maybe don't get as much from the European runs, but everyone benefits. And look, let's be honest, most of the clubs can't compete with Larne because of the investment they have already at this stage. So an extra few quid, as considerable as it is from a European run, isn't going to make that much of a difference to most clubs. it'll only be the likes of maybe Linfield and Cliftonville, the people that you think will be challenging Larne, they might have more of a gripe with it. Um, but this would just be huge for Irish League football. It would put Irish League football on a map that they haven't been on. Um, there'd be so much more interest, televised games, bigger shop windows for players. I just think this would open up so many things. But make no mistake about it, if they don't do this, there will be a lot of regret there. There will be a lot of soul searching. Because this is a different type of pressure. Larne have been that sort of, the plucky underdog, and then all of a sudden they had money, but they've done everything the right way. There hasn't been a major amount of pressure in terms of they have to do this by a certain time. There is pressure on this. This is a pressure they have never, ever felt before, and that could play a huge part in the game. The good thing is, they've experienced Europe for a couple of years now. They've got enough know-how within that dressing room. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to make everyone sweat for it. I don't think it's going to be a routine evening for everybody, but I just think it would be such a good news story for the league. And look, let's be honest, it's been a dismal year in Europe, aside from Larne, and even Larne's Champions League qualifiers were a bit of a nightmare as well. The Irish League needs this. There's a lot of improvements going on and off the pitch everywhere. I think it's now time, with the money involved in the game as well. I think it's time we saw a team take this next step.
It's the chance to push down the accelerator on this league development. And if Larne get through, what a manic couple of days we could see between now and the closing of the transfer window. How could that impact things up and down the league? Clearly Loughgall will want to try and fill the Benji McGee hole. How does that all domino along the way? But I don't know. There's just, maybe it's just the way things have went before. You mentioned the defending from Larne. They look skittish. They don't look massively composed at the top of the pitch sometimes. And I think if Lincoln Red Imps can score a goal at any point, particularly the first goal, it could knock it out. It's Larne, they'll want to get that goal nice and early. And from there, try and take advantage. And as the game creeps on, I think no matter what, we're probably going to have a very nervy to and fro, back to front, last 50 minutes of that game, no matter what.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Look, I certainly saw enough from Lincoln Red Imps to know that they can come to Inver and score a goal. Even if Larne do tidy up their defending, I think Lincoln Red Imps have that in them that they certainly could. But I stand by it. I still think Larne were the better side. Certainly in the second half. I don't think there was much between them in the first half. And they will fancy their chances at Inver. The smaller pitch will help Larne. It's what they're used to. It's how they set up. I just have a feeling Larne will have enough. But I slightly disagree in terms of, yes, an early goal would be brilliant and, it gets the crowd going. I don't think it's a necessity that they need to get that early goal because, they're just one goal behind. It's 0-0 at halftime. I don't think there were too many people panicking, certainly within the club. But yeah, I think they'll just about have enough. I don't think it'll be easy. I don't think it'll be a particularly comfortable night for the Larne fans there, but I think they will just about have enough.
Waiting with bated breath. Final bit of news that popped up this week. I don't think a lot of people have totally got their head around it. Larne winning appeal, Sunday football. Significant, I felt.
Loughgall winning the appeal?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a bit of a strange one for me. I don't particularly see what Niffle did wrong, in terms of prize money and things like that. And, take Loughgall out of this, because it's nothing against Loughgall. If any club were to raise this, if a club doesn't want to play on a Sunday, I understand that, and there's many reasons for that. Wouldn't be my idea. I think Sunday's a great day to play football. I think we've seen in recent years crowds are good as long as you're not going up against a huge game on Sky or something like that. I think we've seen that it works in terms of crowds. But if a club doesn't want to do it, fine. But if that same club then wants to play in the Bet McLean League Cup. Well, we all know the final's going to be on a Sunday. So are they then saying, we don't mind it if we get to a final, but for the sake of maybe once or twice a season, at the very most, then we're absolutely against it in terms of a league game? I don't really understand the argument. Now, there'll be a lot of people piling in saying, no, you shouldn't play Irish League football. It's a part-time league. It shouldn't be played on a Sunday. It's the only day players have time, for their families and all of that. I get all that, and that's a totally legitimate argument. But having spoken to several people down the years, because like, let's be honest, Sunday football isn't a new issue. It's not a new topic for people to talk about in Irish League football. And from speaking to people down the years, a lot of it has just been, oh, but I enjoy my Saturday night out. Can't be playing on a Sunday. And look, let's not kid ourselves. That is a big part of it. And I'm not saying that that's where it all stemmed from with Loughgall. Certainly not. But that is a general feeling within the game. And we all like to think that the game's much more professional now, and people certainly wouldn't be thinking like that. Trust me, a lot of people are. But look, in terms of Loughgall, they certainly thought they had a case, and well done to them. They took it as far as they could, and they won that. I think Niffle will be smarting a little bit from it. But like I said, I struggle really to see what Niffle have done wrong there. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out moving forward with other clubs.
A couple of games to look back on. We haven't talked a huge amount about last Tuesday's games, but mainly from Saturday's fixtures. The big game going into it was Crews against Cliftonville. Both teams are going in with an 100% winning record, and I think a 1-1 draw was probably a surprise to nobody. The big things that stood out to me was that one, I think it was a penalty. I'm surprised at that as being a bit of a talking point, and the other point is, and I saw moments of this in their European game. Crusaders have got a good one in this Offord fella.
Yeah, he started the season like a house on fire. He's been absolutely brilliant. He impressed me that the season at the Oval, and you could just see the coolness he has when he's in on goal as well. I think Decky Cadell will be very excited by what the season could bring for him. But going into the game, I agree with you. I mean, it had draw written all over it. You had Crusaders who, it's going to be a transitional season. I'm sure they'll have some standout wins, but they'll also have some performances leave you scratching your head. I think it's going to be one of those years. And you look at Cliftonville with the firepower they've lost. They've started the season. Yes, they won every game ahead of the North Belfast Derby, but I think even their own fans and certainly their manager would admit that they haven't been firing on all cylinders. So it to me, it had draw written all over it. I wasn't one bit surprised, but I do agree with you. I don't see the debate whatsoever when it comes to the penalty. Penalty all day long.
There's definitely debate about it, and I think they got it wrong. Glenavon get out of the Coleraine Showgrounds 2-0, or maybe should we call it Gareth Dean 2, Coleraine 0. Dave McDade, I think he was offside, and then some amazing saves from the former Coleraine stopper. Seals the 3 points, and a massive 3 points for the Lurgan Blues.
Yeah, I think the officials were maybe the only people inside the showground didn't think David McDade was offside. It's hard to tell. You don't have maybe all of the angles you need, but from the naked eye, I mean, it looks offside, and I think Glenavon away with one there. That said, I think Glenavon certainly played well. It wasn't like a smash and grab victory, but yeah, they do have their keeper to thank as well. One of those saves in particular in the first half was just outrageous. And people might be harsh saying that's what a goalkeeper's there to do. No, that's not normal what Gareth Dean did. His body's going one way, the ball's going the other, to be able to shift his weight enough to get a strong hand. Not only that, to get it around the post as well. It's so easy if you get there, you just put it back in the center of the 6-yard box and someone just pokes it home. It was an outrageous save. And I know certainly they will have a lot to thank Gareth Dean for after that. But look, it was a much needed victory. You know, you know, it's maybe unfair, but there were a lot of sniggering going on the fact that Larne hadn't kicked the ball, but they were still above Glenavon and Ballymena. Going into last weekend's fixtures, and Stephen McDonnell definitely needed this victory because you know Glenavon didn't start last season too well. We all know how that ended with Gary Hamilton ending up losing his job, and I'm sure there would have been a lot of questions about Stephen McDonnell because he's had his own preseason. He's been there almost a year. This is his team now. He can have no excuses that way. He's been backed by the board. He needs to deliver results now. And if had they gone another week, I'm sure the pressure would have started to mount.
I think games like this is just shows that there will be teething problems for Coleraine, and I think they'll get some big results against top six sides, and then games like this Glenavon game will come around, and I think for a lot of fans they will feel echoes of games like this last season. And you mentioned it there with Larne not being bottom despite not playing any games, and unfortunately Ballymena are the team that's sitting there looking up at them. And this revolution so far down at the Ballymena Showgrounds hasn't really been set alight. They had a good opportunity against Dungannon Swifts. We'll talk about the issue that happened to Dungannon before the game in a bit, but on the pitch, certainly that news of the crash clearly galvanised the Swifts. The game was played, and it's Dylan once again stepping up and doing a little bit of magic, and a big 3 points for Dungannon.
Yeah, and look, it's already been a big season for Keelan Dillon. A couple of goals to his name already. And that's a huge goal because, they have to target games against the clubs that are expected to be in and around their own position. Make no mistake about it, that's a massive, massive victory for Dungannon. In terms of Ballymena, look, there's no doubt it's been a poor start to the season. Jim Irvin will have expected more, but we all know the pressure he was under at the end of last season trying to keep a huge club like Ballymena in the top flight. He managed to do that. There's now a different pressure, and again, it's a massive pressure because he's been backed in the transfer market. They've made possibly the most eye-catching signing of the summer with Ben Kennedy coming from Crusaders. They are expected to finish in the top six, not to maybe come out the right side of a relegation fight. That's not in the plan. So it's an alarming start to the season, but I think Jim Irvin could have seen that maybe he is lacking a goal scorer, and I know he's been working tirelessly to try to bring somebody in. He still has the experience and the qualities of John Heron to come in when he completes his 10-match ban. But I don't necessarily think that everything is fixed at Ballymena just by bringing John Heron into the club. I do worry where the goals are going to come from. But look, it takes time for these new players to gel together. And with the quality they have in that squad right now, I don't think they're going to be in that much bother. But they're going to have to get results soon because as much as winning is a habit, so is losing.
Significant result for Glentoran. I thought going down to Taylor's Avenue Friday night, going behind, don't think that was a penalty due to Heatley being outside the box. They then Carrick go down to 10 men. Glentoran push back. Never boring, but look, they get the 3 points. And a player that stood out to me was James Douglas. Where have they got him? He looks to have a great frame, determination, and could be a real wild card player in this starting 11 potentially going forward.
Yeah, and look, he's exactly the type of player that Glenmen love. They've been crying for ages to see young players from within the club setup to be given a chance because maybe some big name signings hadn't been doing it for several years. And there's one thing about Glenmen, they will give young players all the backing in the world. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And we've seen already this season that this boy can play. His attitude on the pitch, his ability, everything about him impressed me on Friday night. And look, it was a great victory for Glentoran. It was topsy-turvy. It was, you never quite know what you're getting with Glentoran. But I don't think many teams will go to Carrick this season and get it easy and come away with an easy victory I think that's a big, big victory for the Glens. They also had to dig in a bit. Okay, they were a man to the good for more than half of the game, but anyone who's watched football for any length of time will tell you that that's not always as easy as it seems, playing with a man more. Um, but to me, that was an impressive victory, and Frankie Vid as well. Someone who really caught the eye. He had a really difficult,
Oh, what a pickup.
he had a really difficult night to start of the season against Crusaders. He had a big hand in that victory on Friday night. And look, someone we've already talked about, David Fisher. And for all the stick Warren Feeney gets, from Glenmen, let's remember they got a sizable transfer fee probably for Warren Feeney's son. And maybe their most prized asset and most effective player right now was a Warren Feeney signing. He didn't get it all wrong. But look, David Fisher's got quality. We saw that last season. It's no great surprise that he shows the quality, that fox in the box ability. Both finishes were equally as impressive. Maybe not a 30-yarder or anything like that, but I think for anyone who watches football, they love finishes like that, and I don't think there's anyone else in that Glentoran side is able to do that.
And we've talked a lot about Linfield on this podcast so far. 5-1 at home, Windsor Park against Loughgall. I think we've seen a lot of games like this. I think we'll see plenty more of games like this at 3 p.m. on a Saturday at Windsor Park. Linfield are able to just flex their muscles, and they have on paper, of course, a really nice start to the season. They've been able to use this as a platform to stack up the points, score lots of goals. They've got Portadown on Friday. I guess Loughgall were just undone by a far better team.
Yeah, look, I think it was as routine as it comes for Linfield. Loughgall have probably made a better start to the season than some people were expecting, myself included. They again, Benji McGee had gone. You don't know how they're going to react to that. Um, but Linfield have just shown at the start of the season that yes, they should be winning these games on paper, but they're sweeping these sides aside, and that was certainly the case on Saturday. They're scoring a lot of early goals, which is helpful. I'm sure there was a lot of tension around the place at the start because of the speculation about David Healy. Probably wasn't helped even after the match in terms of David not doing any media interviews. That probably only added fuel to the fire. But he certainly had his own reasons for that. But look, I think from the second Larne had their games postponed because of the European run, David Healy would have been saying, we need 15 points from 15 points at the start of the season. We have to do that. We have to make the perfect start. We have to pile the pressure on Larne before they kick the ball. And I think Linfield have been pretty flawless so far. And they will certainly go into the Friday night fully expecting to make it 15 points and 15 points.
Let's go straight to Friday night. Portadown host Linfield at Shamrock Park. It's a chance to just continually increase this little cushion that they have. I think they'll come in strong favourites. Portadown have had a kind of weird start to the season where points on the board aren't particularly impressive. They will take that 2-2 draw against Loughgall away, thinking they had the chance to win that game. They also almost had the chance to lose it and be sitting here with nothing. But they've been sparky, but perhaps not as effective as they'd want to be. And I would expect Linfield to potentially have this game wrapped up by halftime, despite it being down at Shamrock Park.
Yeah, and look, it's one of those games that, excuse me, I always get excited about in the Irish League. Thinking back years ago of Linfield going to Shamrock Park and some huge crowds and huge games. A lot has changed since then. Like you, I would expect Linfield to start quickly. They've done that so far this season. And with Portadown, I think Niall Curry will certainly be encouraged in terms of performances this season. Now you can only say that for so long. Promising performances, if it doesn't equal points, is pretty meaningless. Um, After a certain amount of time. But I don't think anyone at Portadown will be getting their knickers in a knot about anything so far. They were very unlucky against Glentoran as well. That deflected Niall McGinn shot late in the day. I think Portadown will have a decent enough season. it's no surprise Niall has brought in as many players as he has. That's his way of doing things. And I mean, who can argue against him? Because more often than not, it works. But it will take time. Just with every other club as well, this will take time. My only concern for Portadown would be the fact that the squad is so big. I don't know how that translates to in terms of on the training pitch, how you can get things done. And I'm sure they will be looking maybe to offload some players in the coming days. But I don't think Portadown season is going to be dictated by their performances against Linfield this season. And I think Niall certainly, as much as I said earlier, performances don't mean much without points. I think Niall will just be looking for another positive performance, whilst probably in his heart of hearts not fully expecting to come away with anything.
Yeah, they've had a tough enough start to the season. Glentoran, Cliftonville, they draw away at Lockall. They were supposed to play against Larne, Linfield at home. So that's tough enough. I still think a performance is going to be all Portland can hope to get out of this. So I'd be very bullish and say probably 3, maybe more nil. I don't know, it's just 2-0 success. It's how long this stays goalless will probably be Portadown success, and maybe they'll want to take a cheeky lead, but I think Linfield will have the firepower, the fitness, and everything else combined to take away the 3 points. The other game on Friday night is low-key massive. Ballymena against Glenavon. Proper 6-pointer at this time of the season. Ballymena still have got nothing on the board. Glenavon get that win there. It screams draw because of just how tetchy it will likely be. But if either team can get a victory here, it could really spark the early part of their season.
Yeah, and look, Ballymena need a win from somewhere. And I think at this stage, Jim Irvin doesn't care where it comes from. He just needs a victory from somewhere. Glenavon obviously have got their first victory of the season. They'll be buoyed by that. So there'll be a lot more confidence going into this game as there maybe would have been had they lost at Corian. Then it would have been a proper 6-pointer. But, as much as we said, the likes of the North Belfast Derby last week had draw written all over it, I think this one has draw written all over it as well. I think it'll be nervy. I think the longer Ballymena go without winning a game, things become more nervous than they need to be. I think some of the summer signings probably have to show a bit more. I think we all know the player Ben Kennedy is, and in standout moments, there's no one who can match him in the Irish League.
We actually didn't reference this. Do you think his goal that was offside against Dungannon was offside? I don't think it was.
I think it's hard to tell, isn't it? I really don't know. Going by the reactions, yeah, it used to be back in the day. I think you could tell by the reaction of players that they knew. So I'm not so sure. I don't know. Look, I think it's easy. We can all just hammer referees, can't we? Because that's kind of a lovely pastime. I don't know. I don't think they can get every decision wrong, surely. Because we've seen some whoppers in the past couple of weeks of referees getting things wrong. Maybe give him the benefit of the doubt this time. But look, Ben Kennedy, we know the quality he has. That's why they've signed Ben. And a lot of clubs wanted him, but he's going to have to not necessarily change his game, but he's going to have to be more consistent.
On this game, Ben Kennedy will be key if Ballymena, I think, are to get the points. I just think it's going to be 0-0. A win for Glenavon would be magic. 6 points on Ballymena, somebody they would consider a rival down there. Any points for a lot of these teams down there are huge. In turn, Ballymena can get those 3 points. They could drag it all back again, but I think a 0-0 will provide kind of a muted solace for both. Crews, Carrick, it always feels like a bit of a rough and tumble kind of game. I must say, I doubted Crews earlier on this year based on the European performances, but they look a lot more solid than previously. They're going to lean on Offord a lot. Stewart is finding his role in this team a bit more. Yes, they can be caught out for pace at the back, but this shouldn't be a massive problem against Carrick Rangers. I think they'll win this 2-0, but it's so hard to predict with Carrick because they're so inconsistent. The big push for them is going to be one, Danny Gibson's up and running, which I know comes with a penalty spot, but Carrick need him to be an effective goal scorer like he was last year to help them push to be on the precipice of the top 6, get that 7th place. But of course, the big story is here, Paul Heatley returns to Seaview. Interesting game on the horizon.
Yeah, and look, Paul Heatley rolling back the years last Friday night, being as cute as he's always been to win the penalty, and then he scores a fantastic goal as well. Um, and look, he'll get a brilliant welcome as well from the Cruise fans because they know exactly what he did for 12 years for their club. But I agree with you, Carrick. You just never quite know. Um, at home, I would always fancy Carrick. Away from home, we've seen, even last season they had an absolute nightmare at Seaview. Um, I, I can't see Carrick winning if I'm being honest. And you know, there are a lot more questions now about Carrick. In the last couple of years, they got a record points total last season, and which was brilliant. But with the signs they've made, the money that they are putting into it, they're expected to finish in the top six now. It's not just that that we've won a few more points than we did last season. That's not going to be good enough. And that's why their inconsistency would still slightly concern me because you look all that pitch and they've so much experience. The players who have been there and done it. Now maybe they will surprise us against the Cruise, but I just think that inconsistency, as they showed when they went to Loughgall, you'd never quite know. And I just think with the form that the Cruise have shown at the start of the season, I think they'll just about have enough to get the job done without too many concerns.
I feel quite confident that Glentoran are going to beat Cliftonville at the Oval. It's that kind of draw, perhaps not an exciting game, but Cliftonville have not. Yes, they have that game against the Cruise, but they haven't had a big challenge yet. And I think going to Glentoran, them boosted by those 3 goals on Friday night, I think they'll just be a bit more fluid. This backline of Cliftonville's, despite looking though they have a lot of name talent, look quite rigid. It was a poor goal to give away against the Cruise, and I think in the Oval it should be a victory for Glentoran. I'm going to go 2-0 actually.
Well, I don't know if I'd be as confident. I do fancy the Glens to win. I think, relatively speaking, it's been a decent start to the season for the Glens after a really, really poor start against the Cruise. Cliftonville have points on the board, but like I said earlier, I don't think any of those victories have been overly convincing. Um, like I said earlier about several clubs as well, it's going to take time for these players to gel defensively. They don't look as stable as you would expect. And I mean, when they've lost the likes of Ben Wilson and Ronan Hale and Sam Ashford, it's no surprise that they're not scoring the same amount of goals. These are always tight games as well. Maybe the scoreline doesn't say that, but a lot of the times they're very tight games. And I would just, given the nature of the victory on Friday night and the sort of the feel good factor in terms of what's going on the pitch in recent weeks for the Glens, I would fancy them to have enough to beat Cliftonville.
If you were an Irish League tourist this weekend and you wanted goals, I think you got to go to Lakeview Park, Loughgall against Dungannon. That'll be open. That'll be fun. I think it's going to end up being that honours are even at 2-2. But these are 2 teams that love to get the ball in the deck, try and play a bit of football, and I think they'll put each other under significant pressure and should be a bit of a cracking game to watch.
Yeah, I agree with you. In terms of entertainment, I think that might be the place to be. You know what you're going to get from Loughgall. And they've shown already this season that, okay, we're only a few games in, but maybe they won't be the one season wonders a lot of people were predicting. Um, they've added quite a bit of experience to their squad as well. Now, will that work? Only time will tell. And in terms of Dungannon, again, another club, Rodney McAree does a good job no matter where he is. I think he's learned so much in recent years. He's obviously got Dungannon playing good football, but in a very different way to Dean Shields. I think it's more pragmatic. I think it suits them better. He's brought some quality in to the club. Um, I would just say that with getting the victory and everything that surrounded it last Saturday, I fancy Dungannon this week.
It would be a huge result for them, wouldn't it? From a points total point of view, another 3 points there would justify, I think, the murmurings of hype about this Dungannon team going into the season.
Yeah, And like I said, we've sat for years and said Dungannon always bring through a lot of promising young players, and they continue to do that. I think Rodney has improved them on the pitch as well. I think there's been some shrewd signings. I know John McGovern's a super signing now. Whether they can keep him fit is another issue. But if they can get points on the board early in the season, they'll be looking at why shouldn't they target the top six? Because to me, this is another season that, Cliftonville are weaker so far. Glentoran, you never quite know what you're getting. Crusaders are going to go through transition. Coleraine have gone full time. That's going to take a while. Who knows how that's going to go? And I think a lot of the clubs in the bottom six have to be looking at, what, this could be our year. If we can put a run of results together and beat those clubs again, the ones that are in and around us traditionally, like this game this weekend for Dungannon, I just think it could be a huge season for Dungannon. I'm not saying they're going to go and win trophies, but I think Rodney McAree wants a steady increase in the quality every single season, and I think he has to win games like this if that's going to happen.
We didn't reference the road traffic collision that happened on Saturday. News was emerging just maybe an hour or so before the game. It involved Dunn, Knowles, Maguire, and Wallace. They obviously didn't play. By all accounts, that they are looking all right, is what McAree was saying on Saturday evening. These things happen, and I guess if there is any recovery to happen, hopefully it is swift, and luckily everybody is okay.
Yeah, look, I think that's the main thing. It was worrying when you saw the tweet originally on Saturday, the news of the crash. And by all accounts, there was four cars involved in it, so it wasn't like a small crash. But thankfully, I think Rodney has already said that, the players are fine. I think some of them went to hospital as a precaution. Um, and look, I'm sure that was difficult for the rest of the lads in that changing room, knowing that, their mates have been involved in that so close to kickoff. And, even from a preparation side of it, Rodney had to change certain things. That wasn't the most important thing that day. All he cared about was that those lads were all right and everyone else involved was okay. Um, but yeah, it was a strange situation because I know Dungannon certainly wanted the game called off. And there was, by all accounts, there's nothing in the rules that would allow that to happen. I think both clubs would have had to have agreed. Um, and for whatever reason, that didn't happen. Um, but look, make no mistake about it again, that was a huge, huge victory for Dungannon last week. And I think it can only be positive for them going forward. And I think, given what happened, I think most Irish League fans were very happy to see Dungannon win last week.
Final game of the weekend. Larne, welcome to the Irish League for the year 2024-2025. 2:15 kickoff on Sunday against Coleraine. It's hard to tell based on what will happen in Europe, but I kind of think this will be a draw.
I think it's hard to know. I think what happens in the European game will play a huge part in what happens on Sunday. If Larne get to that promised land, they'll be full of confidence. Their fans will be raucous. You know, I think everyone will be playing just with so much confidence. But if they were to suffer that heartbreak, you know, you'd never quite know how long it takes players to get over that. Everyone's different as well. And look, I'm sure they will make changes. They'll have a big enough squad they're able to do that. But as impressive as Larne were last season, they didn't start the season particularly well. We all remember that incredible 4-4 against Dungannon early in the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Larne didn't start with a victory. But I just think if they were to get through in Europe with everything going their way, then it could be a routine victory. And as we've seen from Coleraine so far this season, we're not quite sure what Coleraine are yet. We've seen some of the qualities, we've seen some of the issues they might have. I certainly didn't think Glenavon would go to the showgrounds and win last week, despite having a good record there. I just have a feeling if Larne get through in Europe, it'll be a routine victory. If they don't get through in Europe, it could be anything.
And Mark, before we let you go, a few days left of the transfer window. Larne could be a big player in it if things go well for them. Is there any clubs you expect to be busy between now and the windows close? And is there any players that you think might be playing in a different strip, or could be at least, with only a few days to go?
Look, I would expect Glentoran to be extremely busy. Certainly behind the scenes, I know they've tried and lost out on a few players even in the past sort of 10 days, which has been frustrating for Decky Devine. But I think they know that they definitely have to add to their squad if they can. Um, it's going to be interesting. I thought Linfield's business was done a week ago, but the fact you've had all of these rumours about David Healy and the fact he's now signed a new contract, and I'm sure he wanted assurances from the board that more money will be there to spend. Does he maybe have a trick up his sleeve in the last hours of the window? Again, I wouldn't rule that out completely. And like you said, Larne, they've signed 3 players already, and we're only a couple of days into the week. Um, would they go again for Fisher? Possibly. If they don't, will they go for another striker? I think they probably will. Whether they get them or not, I don't think Tiernan's going to bring someone in just to make up numbers. I think it's someone he has to add to the squad. But I would expect most clubs will be busy trying to do something. I know Ballymena are certainly trying to bring a striker in. But I think if you asked any Irish League manager, they would all want to bring a striker in, and there's only so many to go around. So yeah, I would expect there will be some more business to be done. I don't know necessarily we're going to see the big marquee signing though.
Yeah, it's more maybe loans towards the lower end of the league that could be the most interesting thing. Player comes in, everything shuffles down, then suddenly player X wants to get out of there, and that could have almost the biggest impact. But yeah, I kind of like it. We've had busy-ish ends to the windows in previous years, so we'll see if all that comes to fruition. But Mark, thank you so much for coming back, joining in. Big week as it was. For those that I'm sure they're keen followers of you, but if they are not, where can they find such musings from yourself on a regular basis, online and beyond?
I would say just have a look at my Twitter, and whatever's going on will be posted up on there. There's always stuff happening.
And I would like to back that push. You were there about the McIntosh deal. You are incredibly well connected, and yes, it's always great to follow Mark McIntosh because he knows his stuff, as you've heard for the past hour or so in this podcast. Mark, thank you so much. Look forward to chatting to you soon.
Cheers, mate. Good to be back.